Hi, welcome listeners. Today on this third episode of our podcast, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Raymond Davies, who is an expert and carrying 3 decades of experience of top level international supply chain experience within a full range of sectors. Dr. Davies' particular skill is in the planning and strategic leadership of creating new market opportunities resulting from geopolitical opportunity. He sits on the coalition of for business development of Romania Entrepreneurship Task Force, and he's also the UK board member on the British American Business Council Pacific Northwest. And he also seems to be active in British politics with a focus on SME development and international trade. A very, very warm welcome, Dr. Davies, to you on our show, and thank you very much for coming it over.
My absolute pleasure, Deepika. I've been looking forward to the podcast with you.
Thank you very much. Likewise, it is. And let me just ask you first, how is it going there back in England, Dr. Davies? Have you taken the jab yet?
That is so funny because I literally had my second jab just a few days ago. And the reason, of course, is looking forward to getting back to international travel. And one of those international travel, obviously coming back across into India just as soon as we can, and situations improve as well. So I saw getting my second jab very much about getting back on aircraft and getting back to international business.
Okay, that's lovely. That's great. And today's topic, Dr. Davies, we have is international business and strategy. That is, quite close to my heart. Although I have prepared a few questions for this podcast that I do typically, but I was just wondering, that is so interesting to me that I do not need to prepare any, structured questions. The conversation should be, as fluent and as smooth as it should be.
But so we both have a passion for it then, Deepika.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, Dr. Davies, for our listeners, I would just want to begin why international business is very important. And for our conversation, I'll keep the base. When I say the business, I mean startups, small, medium to enterprise, because large business, they already have the resources and that bandwidth, they can just invest in. So our conversation would, lie within the range for startups and small to medium enterprises.
Well, the thing about that one is I'm an absolute passionate on the leadership on the SME side, and obviously the startup side. And I was very fortunate. I decided, in fact, as an undergraduate, to go into business. So, and that was a few years ago, more than 30 years ago. So I decided to go into a startup situation from an engineering degree. So I understand the importance of startup, the importance of entrepreneurial-led businesses, and that's SMEs. So exactly that. The future is, and the drive and leadership for international trade is going to come from the SME base and the startup base. So that's what I'm particularly passionate about. Large companies actually have shifted, as much as they have the bandwidth, they're totally dependent on their supply chains, which are SMEs, startups. And it's better coordination of that, both internationally and internationally, that's crucial. And that's where I see my leadership.
Yes. So, Dr. Davies, what do you see the importance of international business? Why these companies, these mid-level companies to start up, why they should be thinking of international, going international outside of their home countries to begin with?
It's really interesting you're saying that, because I think what's really changed over the last 30 years or so is the interdependence of trade and business right down to a local level on an international scene. And that is because I think the old 20th century business model was one company at a time, grow a company, and then you become a medium or larger company. Isn't that fantastic? The world doesn't work like that anymore. It's basically supply chains, integrated supply chains, and where you are in the supply chain. That by nature will make you international if you want to succeed and grow. That's the difference of 21st century business and that mentality. Hence my passion and importance for understanding international business, right from startup, and to grow your business, you're in the business of international trade right from the start.
Okay, absolutely. That absolutely makes sense. So Why SMEs, small businesses? I mean, they definitely, as you just recently covered, that there's a definitely the benefit that comes from the volume side, and they have expansion to different markets where the consumer base is absolutely in huge volume. So it just depends on their segment, on the category which they are into. And so, for example, if there is an SME or a startup, they have a very tight budget. I mean, how they
Yes.
should strategize to move to international geography, Dr. Davis?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about that is, again, I think that here's the key difference. When you're in your own business, is an entrepreneurial mindset that is truly unique. You have to understand both your strategic, operational, and tactical employment, and the limited resources you have, which by definition is cash flow. And what it is not to see your limitation to that. I think the governments are recognizing that. So again, they're looking for support programs and ways and means in which they can bring resource, which includes expertise, which includes government officials, to really aid in your growth and international perspective of your business. So it's really looking at I think, your drive as an entrepreneur, and really the resources that are around you besides your own budget, and really have that international mindset. Also, really get to understand where you fit and what part of the supply chains are really drawn to your business. So it's always the game, I think, in business is, of course, managing your cash situation and what you can do within that cash situation. But actually, the support mechanisms around you that can enable you to go international are quite comprehensive now. I think I'm here on the United Kingdom side, and of course we've just left the European Union, so we have, and as an island, we're very directed towards international trade, and of course with our close friends, and India's top of that list. And it's almost, in a sense as well, in these bilateral trade situations, for a business and startup within India, really seek to look to work with British companies, because we're in that mindset. And I know for a fact the British Embassy is keen on our consulates in India, keen to look and work with SMEs and Indian SMEs, and see that as a two-way process. Both the work with those type of businesses in India, and at the same time really encourage them to work with our businesses over here in the United Kingdom.
Yes. At the same time, would you want to talk a little bit more on the challenges on the culture side, on the political side, when these mid-sized companies are pondering to move to different countries in terms of expansion? So what are the challenges they get when they are moving for the very first time to the country, to the host country?
I think you hit it on the head. I think first of all is the cultural aspect of doing business. And I've done a lot of business in a number of countries, and we have a different cultural attitude to business, and also our interaction into the public type sector and the regulational type framework. So I think one of the hardest aspects of going into another market is to give yourself time to really understand the cultural aspects of which you're entering, and at the same time understand the political opportunities and threats to that entry as well. So it's almost, you've got to find, give yourself time to understand the markets that you're entering, and then look for those partnerships and local partnerships that can achieve your objectives faster. So I think the great thing about, and I think our entrepreneurial type business, we're more in tune of getting to understand what is the cultural difference of the markets we're going into. And there's all kinds of aspects to that, to the way you would sell into that market, to an understanding of the geopolitical motivations within those markets. I think that's the hardest part, actually. So it's almost, you've got to have yourself a little bit of patience. No, you have to put that little bit of work in and get to understand it, but the results coming from that will be huge.
Yes. Dr. Davies, if we move back to our MBA days, I know that you have finished your MBAs in early 90s.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have finished my MBA in 2014.
There we go. So we're coming from two different eras, and I know where your
Yes.
question's coming from, because there's different philosophies coming from the time you go to business school. So go ahead.
Yes. My question is in terms of go-to-market strategy, because you are in your home country and you are planning to
Yes.
move out to different country. For example, not in terms of just having sort of investment there in terms of greenfield investment or starting a project, but let's say
Yes.
to begin with as an export of services or export of products.
Yes.
So what should be the go-to marketing strategy for the businesses to start from?
Yeah, there's two aspects to it. I think, the different timing we went to business school as well gives me a fundamental understanding of why the market is as it is. So when I was during the 80s, large companies really diversified hugely, took on a lot of debt because their return on investment was so great. If you could lend at 8% and get a return on investment 15%, it was fantastic. Then literally early 90s, there was a sudden increase in interest rates, and they kind of realized that they have to put all the work out and put the risk down to their supply chains and suppliers. So that mentality basically created the very thing that I'm talking about, which is really on the marketing side, is understanding where you're fitting in on the supply chains of which you're part of, and also to pinpoint really where those market opportunities are in that aspect in the market that you're entering. I think in doing it's like doing your homework first, really understanding that and moving into the spaces that that you can really stand out amongst the crowd. And I think the other aspect of it, and this is the crucial part of marketing, I'm fundamentally believe in relationship marketing. So it's not just putting in products and services and determining what that will mean in all kinds of features to your products and services, whether it be pricing, whatever, but also knowing which are the key, I would say, individuals that you should be building those relationships with, and also understand the organizations that you think you will be selling into, really understanding how to find those individual buyer influences and build those relationships. So to me, the key in entering any kind of new market, and particularly in the international sense, is to build that relationships at an individual level, not see it that you're selling to organizations, but you're selling to individuals and buyer influences within those organizations and how they influence other parts of the supply chain of which you are part of. I think the greatest thing about being an entrepreneur, we tend to have those type of personalities that can build those relationships,
Yes.
which makes us unique when we choose to be entrepreneurs, actually.
I think it's
Rather than a job and a career type of approach.
Yeah. I mean, it's always about building trust with your business partners or your customers. So from there on, you start building the relationships with your potential customers or industry partners. So having said that,
I would include, and here's
yes.
the thing as well, is if you're selling into a government market, with a lot of us are from the point of view that really politics is now dominating so much of the markets and determining policy in those markets and funding in those markets. It also means building up those relationships. Don't think governments are just brick walls. There are individuals that make those decisions within a government type structure. And I think that's where democracy is coming, because we can approach that through our politicians as well. So I think, again, as entrepreneurs, we have a particular edge on achieving that, whether you're selling into, like you said, the consumer type market, or you're selling to B2B or B to government. I think it is about building those individual relationships, knowing why you're doing those relationships and building that trust, even into civil and public servant decision makers. I think it's time well spent. I think, and also you get a unique understanding of how your market operates, where you're going to, and internationally, that could give you a huge edge as well.
Yes. Having said so, Dr. Davies, since you mentioned the role of government and the policies in terms of international businesses,
yes.
And especially after 80s or so, or probably mid 90s, I have been watching the trends. I mean, although I'm a 90s born kid,
Yes.
I have seen the trends that, especially after mid 90s, the role of government policies have definitely played a huge role in shaping the policies.
I would say starting to dominate
developing
markets.
businesses among the countries.
I would say dominate. In a sense, I think you're absolutely right, and you've seen the trend. Very much coming out of the 80s into the 90s, private sector led, entrepreneur led. What's happened since, I would say, kind of mid to late 90s, a policy set in place where government in a sense, and they use the language, control the economy, build the economy, create jobs. No, they don't.
Yes.
Businesses do that. But what they've done is grown where their policies and their determination and the central bank coordination has literally driven policy-driven markets. And that continues. And I think what we've seen over the awful pandemic period is, in a sense, governments have gone way over the top in really saying what they think of the markets, what they think of the policies, and driving cash into those liquidity into those markets. What we have to do, and I think here's the trend back, is, of course, us as entrepreneurs, the SMEs and startups, we have a clearer vision of where the world should really be going, and certainly economically, and certainly in the sense of working together to create the world we know we can create. Governments tend not to do that, and they, I would say, overextended themselves, trying to force markets, force technologies that aren't ready for, I would say, a market. Hence the huge subsidies going in that causes those type of distortions. I think the world needs the leadership that we can give as entrepreneurs and SMEs now, quite crucially.
Yes. Dr. Davies, we have been going through pandemic COVID-19 since March 2020. So how do you see that pandemic shaping the international business scenario going forward?
I think it's transformed it completely. And this is a classic example where we can reach out, have a podcast across huge distances. What it's basically done is my life was very much on aircraft, traveling, jet lag. I've achieved in a year through a screen that, on my business development program that would have took me 3 to 5 years by aircraft and going into meetings. I think what the pandemic has done has totally and utterly empowered us as business people, as entrepreneurs, in a connectability that is unbelievable, transformative, and I think it's going to really transform the way business is done. I would say for my business, it has absolutely accelerated what we can do and the reach of which we can do it and speed it up, because I don't always have to be on aircraft. I've been handling from the west coast of the United States right away across to your part of the world, all in the same day. Everyone's so used to doing it that people will now do really quite detailed meetings on the screen. Huge transformation.
I'm absolutely with you, Dr. Davies. As long as you have good internet and the device to operate from. I mean, you are any. It doesn't matter in which location of the world you are. But before pandemic, there was a different scenario. I mean, that is something that has helped transforming the businesses.
Yeah. I'm sorry to talk over you, but here's the huge thing on that. It's almost the technological revolution we've got, and also I'm kind of involved in the aerospace, and that includes space. One of the things is the cost to launch now and put things into orbit is so cheap that now they're putting multiple satellites up that the internet will be anywhere on this globe from a constellation of satellites. Now those will be in place. I forget which one's first. I think it's Elon Musk's team putting it up first with
there's a race been going on
us after that. So what's happening is it's the technological advancement is basically democratizing business, I would say, and the way entrepreneurs can work together in a unique way. And I think also being involved on the political side, it's really policies need to be focal on how do we literally empower the entrepreneurs and the SMEs to work together more effectively. Not manage them, not tell them what to do, not pick winners, literally empower us quickly to work together. That's a little frightening for governments, of course, because of course they think they can plan an economy. So, that's what I love you for. So in a sense, I think what you've just said, I think what we want to do is democratize business and being in business in the way that you said. And I think, like you said, the kind of capability, the tools that you need and connectability into the cloud and the internet, are vital components of that. And if a government's into any kind of spend, it should be on that and targeting that and giving entrepreneurs and SMEs the tools they need to get on and do our job by communicating with each other and do some great business together.
I think the one word that goes, and that is the buzzword these days as well, is digital, going digital.
Absolutely. I think they called it Industrial 4, going to Industrial 5. I love all the words. I love going to these presentations.
Yes.
So basically what it means is the complete democratization of, and it doesn't matter the size of business you are. I think the hugest transformation of it, you can be a tiny business and perform like a large business now. And no one could tell the difference, actually, unless they did the more in-depth homework. I think also the business model, even the large businesses are now knowing they have to differentiate their business by the coordination of smaller businesses around them. As a smaller business, you could do the same thing as well. So the discerning between the large company, the small company, the startup is also getting blurred because of the technologies that enable you to project yourself and your business internationally are, if I can say, relatively cheap to your reach.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is something that has been, very significant. It's really significant to go with that thoughts, Dr. Davies. I think G7 is almost around the corner. I think it's in your part of the world, UK to be precise. Yes.
I believe it started today in Cornwall.
Today.
So that's, southwest of England.
Yes, because I've seen Boris Johnson's LinkedIn post.
Yes.
He was getting out of his aeroplane and just waving to the media. So I just inferred that it's already started. So what's you deciphering from the G7? How politics and international businesses are looking forward to?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting on G7. Like, I think what tends to happen is a lot more